grand finals on the line, and he's taking on Denis Lazavik, who is no easy customer, and we're off.
We're off. It's e4, e5. We've seen that consistently throughout today. And okay, it's the Italian opening, so no more Berlins. Breathe a sigh of relief, everyone. Instead, the Italian, the slow Kyoko piano promises a lot of maneuvering. Alireza here, he's going for a long game, it feels like, where he's hoping to catch Denis a bit later on. And this one, Tanya, so many different move orders, so many different setups for both sides. Are you surprised by this choice from Alireza?
It's really one of those openings which seem to say that Alireza is channeling his inner, anti-young player chess. You're out of any theoretical knowledge. We've been singing praises about Denis's opening, his theoretical ideas. So getting this kind of a structure where one move here and there, you could put in an a4, you could take out your knight, you could go short castle, you could delay your castling. At any moment, we could see the a-pawn falling ahead, the bishop falling backwards to b3. So all these ideas give rise to these structures and these plans rather than a concrete line. So I think it's a good approach against Denis Lazavik, Robert.
I was smiling because everything you were saying, you said the light square bishop could retreat, and it immediately did. Black castles first, and for Alireza, he has not castled his own king. Some players start with the knight hop, and in fact, there it is. Because he pushed his pawn up to h3, he took away black's access to this very critical square, and that means he can delay his short castle. He may not castle short if he can launch a huge attack. So for Denis, David, the big question, should you play this move d5?
I think if you can get away with it, you should, and now might be the opportune moment. I'm sitting here smiling, I've got to say, because Alireza Firouzja, he's employing the treatment of the Italian game that I used to play throughout my childhood. I think up until I was a grandmaster, 18, 19 years old, I was just playing just this and nothing else. And it's nice to see him dig deep into the at least allow me to go down a trip on memory lane. And I used to get a lot of criticism for playing like this from the grand old men of British chess. They were saying, this is just lazy. You're not even learning anything. You're just moving pieces around. But there's so much poison, as you highlighted there, Robert. And I'm hoping Denis doesn't play moves like pawn to h6, because that would be like a red rag to a bull. White's g-pawn would throw itself forward and we'd see a blitz attack on the black king. So, to answer your question, d5 is probably a good move. From my experience, at least, it's what black should be doing. Bishop to e6 would be another potential way of meeting this setup, just to trade off pieces, making white's potential attack a little less dangerous. But Denis, certainly, Tanya, the one to start burning time on the clock early, caught by surprise.
Early on, and that's also one of the advantages of taking this setup that we've been discussing, because there is no concrete theory. You've got these plans, these ideas, but the move orders keep switching up, and with a 10-minute, 2-second increment time control, it can become quite tricky to deal with it. All these moves that you're discussing, bishop to e6, d5, I agree with you, David. h6 is asking for trouble, creating a hook on the king side, really inviting the pawn ram on the g file. It looks extremely dangerous. We've been talking about Denis's style, right? He prefers to keep things under control. He likes that solid approach. Do you think that's perhaps why he doesn't choose the move d5 and goes for the more developing, solid bishop e6, Robert?
Definitely. And he acknowledges that he will receive double pawns if white takes, but an open file. Anytime you have double pawns, you gain some access for your rook. So it was a big moment. d5 would have taken us into a more tactical waters. This pawn chain makes sure the e5 pawn is safe. Whenever black pushes d5, you're creating pawn tension. That's good to activate some of your pieces, but you may have a vulnerable pawn on e5 later. And wow, I like this retreat from Alireza. And the reason I like it is because I don't know what he's aiming for. He doesn't want to trade pieces. Keeping more of them on the board means that there are more options. But David, you like to say this. In rapid chess, you often don't want to have too many options, because then you burn the clock and you may spend too much time trying to figure out a way forward.
That's right. Often you just want easy, natural, forced moves, for better or worse. At least you get them down on the board. It helps you to play a bit quicker. But here the players both have a bunch of time left. And finally, Denis does break with d5. I think he's chosen a good moment for it. We were talking about playing this pawn break one move earlier, but now at least he's forced the white light squared bishop a bit more passive. And Alireza pretty much is at a fork in the road right now. He either takes that pawn on d5, from my experience, that it can backfire. Black has a bit more space in the center, but the black e5 pawn can be a bit of a target. Or you continue being provocative by playing a move like queen to e2. You essentially say, yes, you can take on e4, but the queen stay on the board, and slowly I'm going to kind of slither around and try to attack your king, the black king. Moves like bishop to g5 in the air after that, knight to g5 in the air. Okay, he goes for the former option of trading pawns. Maybe slightly less ambitious, but also a lot safer. And now I'm expecting Denis to recapture. I'm not sure with which piece, actually. I was going to say originally the knight, but also taking with the queen would be perfectly viable. And effectively, at least, black is doing fine. Black has a target. We talk about backward pawns. The d3 pawn, Tanya, reminiscent of an earlier game with a weakness for the white side.
Yeah, and that just invites doubling up on the D line, long-term weakness there. I am surprised with this trade on D5, and Dennis chooses a third option, not with the knight, with the queen, but brings on his bishop, which also a really nice idea. You place it on a good square. You're provoking white to go C4 to try to push that bishop out, but that creates so many central weaknesses like D4, the square that you're highlighting. And as long as the bishop is on D5, you always have to watch out for a trade on F3 or a potential E4 at the right time. Black can always step up with the queen to D7, double up on the D file, start putting pressure on the D line. To me, Robert, it looks like Dennis should be very pleased with the opening outcome.
But as someone who has played this position from the black side many times, including in over-the-board classical chess, I've lost some pretty hurtful games, I'm going to say. It looks like everything's under control. You start feeling confident. Yeah, I'm equalizing. This is great. But white has this very natural plan of bringing a knight to f5, and there are all sorts of sacrifices in the air on g7, a bishop coming out to g5. So you can't just think that, yeah, the engine probably approves of my play. That's it. What is black's actual plan? That is the hard part about positions like this. White, on the other hand, has simple moves. Queen e2, a bishop g5, knight f5. Sometimes black even brings the bishop to c5 and back to f8, just to preemptively say, I understand you want to go after my king. Let's get into a ball. Let's be safe here. But that does take time. It allows white to poke at the center, as David mentioned, a rook coming to e1 later. So I actually feel like these positions are quite challenging for black to play. So David, I'm not surprised at least that Denis Lazavik continues to spend time getting himself down to nearly 5 minutes while Alireza has more than 8.
Might be concerning for the fans of Denis Lazavik, this kind of time usage. Then again, he did this against Magnus Carlsen on multiple occasions, and we learned that Denis is a bit of a demon in the kind of bullet segment of each game, just super resourceful. And wow, his last move, no, I'm in two minds about it. Yes, he's clarifying the central tension. He's being really direct here, trying to force a draw almost by going for symmetry with the pawns. But it is a bit of a negative decision, and temporarily black's position looks a bit loose. Firouzja instantly develops his bishop, and yes, knights might disappear from the board. Yes, pieces might be exchanged, but suddenly the white bishops look really menacing. The c7 pawn is a big target tactically in the near future. The h7 pawn a big target. Robert, does this feel like he's just playing a bit too safe? He's trying to force the issue when he didn't need to panic this early.
I think at first glance it does appear that way, particularly that c7 pawn is loose in the event of a queen trade. I think Denis should continue trading. Here I would play bishop c4. I would be concerned that white is about to play queen d3, rook to d1, one of the rooks, I'm not sure which, and take control of some of the central files. He actually allows queen d3 because he was so worried about this loose pawn on c7 that he brings his bishop to its defense. But I'm starting to like Alireza's position. The bishop on g3, it's attacking and defending. The bishop on c2, and it goes after the black king. For some reason, I like white's position, but then I'm thinking about Tanya. Black has done nothing wrong and no longer seems to have some huge weaknesses.
Huge weaknesses? I don't see a single weakness on the board for black currently. I agree with your point that the bishop on g3 was eyeing the c7 pawn, which is why I really like this quick move that Denis played. He improves that bishop position to b6, making sure that pawn stays defended whenever there's a potential queen trade. So he's kind of looking ahead, preempting that queen trade at some point. So the pawns are defended. I like that bishop on d5. Yes, I agree that it feels that white's pieces might be more active right now. That bishop on c2 may line up with the queen attacking h7, but it doesn't feel like there are any threats that are going to be too difficult for black to actually handle in the position as long as this bishop stays on d5. I'm expecting the queens to be traded off. I think black's still doing fine here, David.
I think I was just kind of reeling from the shock of pawn to e4. It felt like Denis didn't even want to try to be better with the black, but ultimately a draw would be a decent result for him. And you're right, if Alireza can't find anything in the next 2 or 3 moves, then this position could well just fizzle out. So that's why the top players, they are so kind of sensitive to the key moments in games when trends might be about to turn. Alireza invests his time here and now. And if he can't whip up an attack, I think Robert's queen to d3 will be met by bishop e4. Then maybe it's just level. Maybe Denis has got this all under control. I tend to trust him. He's Mr. Invincible. He's so hard to beat. He always seems to have a defensive answer, at least. But Alireza, this is a key moment. Rook to e1, offering some trades. I like this move. He's controlling some squares. Now queen to d3, a much bigger threat. And wow, Robert trying to provoke black into taking on f3 right now.
I think that would be a mistake from Denis's perspective in terms of giving white the bishop pair on an open board, but I'm not really sure he has a huge choice because rook d1, that could win a piece on the next turn as the bishop gets pinned and there are ways to pile up pressure on the pinned bishop. So for Denis, that would mean moving the queen out of the file, and rook d1 still will be available to white in the near future, or taking this, accepting that white will have control of some key squares, particularly the light squares, but the pawn structure is shattered. So he doesn't take. I think that Denis's style is to keep the status quo. He wants symmetry. And for Alireza, once again, he needs to prove that he can have more than just an attractive looking position. He needs to get something a little more. And Tanya, I don't immediately see it. All of the key squares in the position, black has under control.
I agree with you. Queen f6, I really like it. He delays taking on f3. Right now, white doesn't have the option to immediately go with rook to d1 because there is a threat. 2 pieces attacking f3. Only one pawn is defending on f3. So white still needs to spend a move. Are you going to retreat with the knight? That doesn't look very pleasant either. I don't really see a good square for the knight. You can go queen e2, and then black will have the decision to either line up, be the first to bring his rook to d8. But you have to watch out. A move like rook d8 could actually maybe run into bishop h4. There are tactics everywhere. Bishop takes f3, and it's going to be a complete mess. I'm not sure who that works out for. But I like this approach. Keep your bishop back. Keep that bishop on d5 alive. And Robert, you mentioned styles here. David, I want to ask you this question that for these two players fighting this big match against each other, is it fair to say this is an absolute clash of styles?
Definitely. And I didn't expect this type of position purely because of that style aspect, Tanya. I thought Alireza would play something really dynamic, really testing, forcing Denis to kind of walk a tightrope. But this is a bit more strategic. Alireza, more a fiery player. Denis Lazavik, of course, rock solid, as we've mentioned. So Denis, it feels like he's kind of asserting his type of position on Alireza right now. Alireza, however, queen to e2, still asking some questions. Now there's a big threat. Queen to d3, double attack, and finally forces the first imbalance. I think you called it, Tanya. It's this clash of styles. It's kind of just testing the waters here. And it is a short match, so it will be about who's able to navigate this coming position better. Alireza keeps the queens on, Robert, and bishop pair, but fractured structure. How big do you think white's advantage is, if any at all?
I like this bishop on c2. It's in red because it can be dangerous, but of course these pawns are in red because they're bad, double and isolate. Just hard to team up on. And I just want to note their accuracy. These players are playing very precise chess, and for Alireza, he's known for his aggression, his tactical style, but when the position liquidates, it simplifies, he can play great end games. And what Alireza does, and Fabiano Caruana has spoken about this on his podcast, the C-Scored podcast, and many others have too, is that Alireza's play is less accurate. I'm going to put that in air quotes, but it's because he brings his opponent's accuracy down too. And this is why we are all saying that Denis Lazavik is getting a position in his style. Both of the players super accurate to this point. No mistakes whatsoever, no brilliancies, no blunders, nothing. That is an empty scorecard beneath the board. It's because every move, it keeps the position exactly where it was, slightly, ever so slightly better for black initially, and now for white. Tanya, I mean, no budging between these two. Do you believe that one side can gain the upper hand as we see the time? Now both players under 4 minutes.
Just slightly for white. And it comes down to this bishop pair and long term. Yes, the double pawns do compensate black for that bishop pair, for not having that extra bishop. But look at that last move, always eyeing that knight on c6. You're threatening to pick up a pawn if black isn't careful. There could be ideas of taking on c6. The a6 pawn might fall if your queen is moves away from f6. The next move that we might be even seeing is the queen stepping up to the center of the board. Queen to e4 comes to mind, setting up tricks not only against the c6 knight, but ideas like bishop h4 in the air. To me, it just feels like black will have to watch out for these bishops creating a bit of havoc around the black king now that it's placed on a dark square, lining up skewers on the board. Meanwhile, it's not so easy, David, for black to continue finding ways to maybe trade pieces. I don't see how you can do that. To try to create attack, to try to create a direct threat, I don't see how to do that. What do you think? Do you think that black can still find a way to trade some pieces? Because that will really help the cause.
He would love that right now, Denis Lazavik, if he could somehow neutralize white's bishop pair, trade off the queens. But yeah, it's just so difficult to find moves. And rook to d7, given a question mark, I actually think it's a fine move. He's got a clear idea, at least. Rook to e7 would be next if given the opportunity to try and trade off rooks, queens. I noticed there are actually some tactics in the air there, so you have to be slightly careful. But Denis, yeah, I don't envy his clock situation. On the camera, he looks a bit stressed, down to 2 minutes as well. And I don't envy how kind of non-obvious his moves are. So all of these small things, plus my inherent bias for the bishop pair, do make me think that Alireza, this is his chance to strike. But still, of course, hard work to be done, yet to kind of make inroads into the black position. For now, it's just about solid enough, and solid is Denis Lazavik's calling card. So, Robert, question mark for that move, but he's still in it.
It's a question mark that changed the evaluation to, it says better for white by a more noticeable margin. I think it's because the back rank could be dangerous. Your move, rook e7, that is the auto response. And in fact, queen 8 was not the way to capitalize. I think you should have thrown in bishop takes c6 first, dragging the queen away, and only then bringing the queen to the e8 square, because the black king would have been in some danger. But queen 8, so natural. And even after rook e7, this is why I don't want to fault Alireza too much. Once you trade rooks on e7, the queens don't even necessarily have to come off. If black takes back, the white queen can start going after some pawns on this side of the board. So be very careful with what trades you orchestrate. If you're Denis Lazavik, he kind of has to, as bishop e5 in the near future, maybe after taking this knight on c6. Tanya, this looks scary for Denis all of a sudden.
It does, and I don't even believe black will have the option, Robert, to offer that queen trade. There might be tactics in that position that will make it really difficult for black to trade queens, because if you go rook e7, you might be forced, in fact, to take it with your knight on the next move.
Yeah, I'm just showing what you were indicating. Good eye by you that maybe I can quickly show it on the board. That rook e7, rook takes e7, the knight has to take back, because if the queen takes back, bishop takes c6. Tanya found this. It takes the knight while protecting the queen and removing the guard of the black queen on e7 all at once. So if you take the bishop, you do in fact lose your queen. So good eye by you, Tanya. This will not be available to Denis. And if that's the case, he does not want to just trade the rooks and leave the white queen back there. Rook d8, smart move by him. He's flushing the queen out.
The white queen will retreat, most likely to the center of the board. Alireza here, I'm not sure why he's pausing, but he can play on the clock. Look at that, 2.5 minutes against under 1 minute now. Denis, he's going to struggle. Again, we're back in this similar position where he's playing rook to d7, but now taking on c6 at least shatters the black pawn structure. Maybe there are options as well. It's definitely white knocking on the door, asking the questions. Denis, he's really holding together things by a thread. Bishop takes c6 looks so tempting. And Robert, actually, that variation you mentioned, going for the black king, not even trading queens, it's still available for white. It's still on tap.
It is available, but not that easy to assess properly, because white's pawn structure is worse. And Tanya, he plays your decision from earlier. He's trying to provoke g5 and make this king feel weaker. At some point, the bishop can reroute to c2, and that h7 pawn at long last could be hunted. So Tanya, I like this move. Are you starting to fret for Denis, who's down under 30 seconds?
Robert, it's been so instructive the way Alireza does these things. He provokes pawn moves. He did it against Jan Nepomniachtchi, provoking g3 to open up his bishop diagonal. Here he's provoking g5 to open up black's king. And of course, that would leave Alireza in big danger after the bishop would retreat. So he does... Denis in big danger. Denis does none of that. He wants to trade queens, even if it comes at the cost of destroying his pawn structure. And to me, at first sight, with the bishop pair, it is actually very tempting to go into this endgame. David, do you think trading queens here will give some real chances to white?
I think I would trade queens just for an element of safety for white. You can kind of press for a win with zero risk, but it is also a pawn sacrifice. So maybe Alireza will get tempted to capture the black knight now on c6 and take on that square twice, the white bishop, and then the white queen can take. That's a big pawn to win. Any endgame would then be winning for white, but your queen temporarily would be a bit distanced from her king. I think Alireza deciding how ambitious to be. If he takes queens, yes, he's better, but might not win. He could have gone pawn hunting. No, he chooses the safer option, and only now shatters the black pawn structure. Now the white bishop a bit offside. I would want to get that back to the action as quickly as possible. There we go. Covers the entry point. The black rook was trying to come down to d2. And now it's what we call a 2-result game, Robert. White with an advantage, but is it enough?
That's the huge question right now. And for those of you who thinking, how can white win this game? If you can get your pawns going on this side of the board, you're going to try to break free on the queen side over here. It's a long story, but down the line, black needs to be careful about that. For now, the white king will step in the center to attack the rook, protect the pawn. But black does want to start trading some pieces, as this endgame, you don't have enough material left for white to go after pawns if, say, the bishops get traded. So, Tanya, I feel like white has good winning chances. Oh, he trades the rooks, and he's giving up f2 to win c7. Do you like this decision from Alireza?
I do, because I think black's king is far away from the queen side pawns, and it gives white more chances. Also, the bigger point here is for Denis. He's got very little time to think if he really wants to trade the rooks or not. He does go for it. He believes he can hold it, but Alireza is going to try to push this one. The king steps in, coming towards the center with a tempo right now. Moving forward, there will be a check on black's king at some point. But right now, how do you break this? Do you try to trade off the bishops at some point? What's the plan forward? I do like white's position, despite black's activity of the king.
White simply has a better pawn structure. The two black f pawns are essentially just one pawn. So therefore, on the other flank, the queen side, white has a 3-on-2 advantage, as we know from any sports. Having an extra body often overwhelms the opponent, and white's king can actually journey around towards a5. It might be headed in that direction. Looks like white's queenside majority is going to at least deflect the black army, maybe just win the game on the spot. I'm really surprised, I've got to say, that Denis allowed the kind of c-pawn to drop for the f-pawn. Now it's just pure suffering. And like you said, Tanya, key ingredient is that white can bully the opponent with the threat of a bishop exchange. If bishops disappear, white simply wins. King and pawn endgame, better pawn structure, pass pawn, which he's about to create. He is winning. Firouzja, still some work to do, Robert, to get the king in, but this is the first step.
Well, that was given a question mark, but black's response was bad, because now the carpet is rolled out for the white king. So what Denis needed to do was sit put. He needed to stay there with not allowing the white king in. I think you can even give away this b pawn at some point, use as a decoy, and then the white king marches towards the black pawns, and they will in fact fall. I think Denis, down to 2 seconds, he knows that this one is Alireza's for the taking. He can't keep his miserable pawn structure defended.
Denis could have an hour on his clock right now, and I don't see him defending this position. White has this really strong b passer. Black, as you pointed out, it's impossible ever for him to create counterplay on the king side with a passed pawn. And combining the threats of the b pawn advancing forward and the king infiltrating to that e6 square, this is Alireza's game. And now he's deflecting black's king to enter with his own king to grab the king side pawns. Wow.
Oh, that was sweet, David. That's liquidation. That's grinding like a grandmaster.
Beautiful technique, simplifying the equation. Black's king was too far away. White was even temporarily down a pawn, but this is an easily winning endgame. Denis is about to resign. And there we go. Alireza wins the endgame in perfect style. Really impressive. Ooh, Denis there, just on the back foot from the off. Couldn't fight back. Alireza strikes first.